And we're going to talk about the impact of the project, right, Jason?
Yes, Chairman Mahoney, thank you. And I also have today with me, I have Lucas Franco. He's the research manager with LIUNA, Laborers International Union, North America. And he covers Minnesota and North Dakota. And for those who don't know me, I'm with the North Dakota's building trades unions. Appreciate the time here today to speak to you all as the board. And one of the things is through the conversations, I've been speaking with Joel Paulson, and he referenced it earlier in the beginning of how large this project is and how many jobs could be created from it. 14,000 jobs could be created from this massive project. So working together with Lucas, we did an analysis and really did a report on a transformative investment, and the report has been attached with your packets. And it was really to, how do we maximize the socioeconomic benefits of the diversion? This will bring permanent flood protection to the community, to the area. But then while it's getting built, how do we make sure that it's really beneficial to the people in the community from working on the project and developing it? So we can move into the next slide, please. So with things that I'll kind of get an introduction here, and then I'll pass it off to Lucas, who will kind of go more into the summary of his report that we worked together between the building trades and LIUNA. For many of you, probably myself and Tony Grinberg, or Commissioner Grinberg, excuse me, we sit on the Governor's Workforce Development Council, and for many years, I mean, it's been a huge challenge for not only the city, the region, the state, for all of you that are probably sitting on numerous commissions and boards and forums to how do we solve this. And in 2018, the Workforce Development Council released a report highlighting 5 technical areas that need to be addressed. And one of them was the technical skills gap. And technical skills is defined, jobs requiring high school education beyond high school, but also don't require that 4-year degree. And in that report, we found that in North Dakota, middle skills job or technical skills account for 60% of the labor market. So where we were looking at this and talking with Joel, and then also the genesis of this report is now we're going to put a large infrastructure project in the Fargo-Moorhead area. How do we train local people on the project? And through the studies with Lucas, we found a similar case study that was done in Miami that was delivered in the same method, the private-public partnership, but they had really great success getting local workers on the project, training them up and upskilling them. So what we're going to be talking about here today is been utilized in several different, or in another instance, and we'll be taking advantage of registered apprenticeship program. So with that, I'll just pass it off to Lucas, who can maybe give a quick introduction, and then he'll kind of go through his summary.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Lucas Franco. I'm the research manager for the Laborers Union, as Jason mentioned, and thanks again for having us. So, what we're really talking about today is 3 major challenges that the Fargo-Moorhead region faces. One, of course, is the threat of catastrophic flooding. We all know the potential of not doing anything, and the diversion project is an example of a bold investment in the future of the Fargo-Moorhead area, and it's an important step to preserve the economic vitality of the region. But along with that threat of catastrophic flooding, as Jason mentioned, there's also 2 additional challenges that we think this project could really help to solve. The second is a technical skills gap, and as Jason mentioned, that 2018 report from the state of North Dakota Workforce Development Council really gets into the details of the technical skills gaps that exist in North Dakota, particularly in the construction industry, and talks about how North Dakota at the moment is actually lagging neighboring states. So that's one problem. Another problem is just an overall workforce shortage in the construction industry. I've done a lot of research looking at the wind industry, other major infrastructure, and most recently a report that's coming out next week on the growing reliance on the H-2B guest worker program for construction workers. And the research that I've done has shown what a shift has happened over the last 5-6 years in terms of a reliance on either H-2B guest workers in the construction industry, where you've seen in places like the Fargo market, particularly in concrete. In the last 5 years, there's been an 800-fold increase in the number of H-2B guest workers for concrete work, just this astronomical increase, but also on major infrastructure like wind projects and other projects, a reliance on workers coming from Texas and Utah. So there's the shift towards relying on bringing people in to build our critical infrastructure in the Fargo-Moorhead area. So we think that the Diversion project can go a long way to help solve all of these problems. Obviously, it's all about preventing catastrophic flooding, but it also has this enormous potential to address both workforce shortages and the technical skills gap, both in the metropolitan area, but then in North Dakota overall. And we believe it can solve these problems, and as we outline in our report, by incentivizing contractors that build the project to partner with registered apprenticeship programs. Next slide, please. These programs have a proven track record of recruiting, training, and launching workers into a career in construction. And as I'll detail later, there's a great example of this on another P3 project in the Miami-Dade area. And so there's 5 key components of registered apprenticeship programs. Number one, and what's incredibly essential, is employer involvement, deep buy-in, in this case from contractors on this project. Number 2 is structured on-the-job learning. So as you're working, you're developing skills in an intentional way. Number 3, related instruction. So what you're learning in the field, say in construction, you also spend significant time in the classroom developing those technical skills. Number 4, rewards for skills gained. So what's really important in registered apprenticeship programs is that as you climb the ladder and move towards a journey worker status, for example, in construction, that you're rewarded. Your pay goes up year over year, so it keeps people bought in. There's a mechanism that incentivizes a commitment to follow through and finish the program. And then number 5, national occupational accreditation. That just a stamp of approval that these programs are vetted and they're doing what they say they're going to do in terms of training outcomes. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the advantages of these programs are well documented in peer-reviewed research, which we highlight in the attached in the report that should be included with your packet. These educational programs ensure high-quality construction work. They help workers start family-supporting careers. So this is a pathway into a good family-supporting career in construction. Those that complete a registered apprenticeship program receive on average $300,000 more in compensation than non-participants over the course of their career. So there's clear material incentives for workers to gain that status and to, in this case, become, say, a journey worker, journey construction worker. And finally, they create a safer and more productive workforce. They're targeted and laser focused on developing those technical skills that are so needed. So incentivizing contractors on the Diversion project to partner with registered apprenticeship programs can really go a long way to help us solve our regional workforce shortages and our technical skills gap. This is a once in a lifetime, once in a generation investment in the region, and it can solve the problem of flooding, but it also has so much potential to train and recruit and train the next generation of construction workers. So what we also do in this report, however, is that we look at the sort of consequences of failing to address the current workforce shortages and the technical skills gap. So if we fail to address these two things, it'll likely lead to a heavy reliance on outsourced labor to build this project. And that's really our worry, is what happens if this project is built by a majority non-local workers, folks coming in from out of the region. So next slide, please. So the report goes into great detail in terms of our sort of analysis of different spending patterns between non-local and local residents. But the sort of nutshell, simplified description is that local workers reinvest about 95% of their after-tax, after-savings locally, which we find is about 3 to 4 times as much as the typical non-local worker. So this huge discrepancy in spending patterns, and then each dollar spent has a ripple effect in terms of economic multipliers. And so what we did is we looked at, potentially if across all 14,000 jobs, what would be the cumulative impacts of different percentages, local and non-local. And the graph on the right summarizes some of those possibilities. And so if the workforce was 30% local versus 70% local, we estimate that the economic impact of the project for the local economy would be undercut by $1 billion. So we're talking about a very significant difference. But we can avoid these losses through a commitment to workforce development through registered apprenticeship programs. Next slide, please. So as Jason mentioned, we just wanted to briefly give a case study of a similar situation. So a recent project in Miami offers a good roadmap of both how to build public support for a P3 funded infrastructure project, while also using such an investment as a catalyst for both workforce development and to address technical skills gap. So in the early 2000s, the Florida Department of Transportation sought to build support for a $1 billion P3 funded tunnel project in Miami. And at the time, the region faced similar construction workforce shortages, and local officials worried that the taxpayer funded project could be built largely by non-local workers. And at the time, there are a number of major infrastructure projects that had happened that were built largely with outsourced labor. Additionally, local backers were concerned about local resistance to the project. They weren't getting the buy-in for this project that they wanted. So the Florida Department of Transportation and other regional stakeholders agreed that, quote, in order for the project to succeed, it needed to have a notable impact that could be felt by the community. So they saw some way to engage locals as essential to build support for this project. So to do that, they incentivized the general contractor on the project, as well as subcontractors, to partner with local registered apprenticeship programs. And these programs in the area, these registered apprenticeship programs, had a long track record of recruiting, training, and dispatching area workers to build regional infrastructure. So ultimately, through this partnership, the project was built with about 83% local construction workers, which was a phenomenal success. It launched a new generation of workers into a career in construction, and it was also delivered, importantly, on time and $90 million under budget. So we see that there's really no reason we can't have the same success in the Fargo-Moorhead area, and that this provides such a fantastic example of how we could use the diversion investment to solve the issue of catastrophic flooding, but also to use it as a catalyst to recruit and train the next generation of construction workers in the area. So I'll kick it over to Jason to talk a little more about the details of our plan.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Lucas. And so these were discussions I was having with Joel a couple months ago. Is how do we really solve this? How do we train a local workforce on the project? I know many of you, as board members, want to see the maximum economic benefit coming back to people here in the community, in the region. Fargo, Moorhead, North Dakota, Minnesota. How do we maximize that benefit? And one of the things that we really always advocate for in the trades is the training, the education that really helps, market forces. Instead of just giving a person a fish, you actually train a person how to fish, and that brings those long-term benefits. So, through our research, through that the Miami-Dade County project, tunnel project case study, we feel a real way that if we put a workforce development initiative within the P3 portion of the project, we can really start to begin to solve this technical skills gap challenge. Like it was used in Miami, it had great success with local people, had 83% locals working on the project. but is the biggest thing is that you give the skills and the training and the education. That's the real piece on it. Through a registered format, whether it be working through one of the trade unions. I've spoken with Tony Grinberg, working through maybe through the university system like NDSCS, of how do you give that skills training and education to people who are working on the job site. Just not giving them a job, but giving them training and education. One of the things that we released out of that report in 2018 was the desire to use public-private partnerships. So this would be following that model off of that Workforce Development Council report. But then also one of the benefits that we found out of the kind of an ancillary benefit off of this report was that there was a real big buy-in within the community. There was a lot of skepticism for that Miami-Dade County project, the tunnel project. They'd had a previous project that was a remodel of a sporting facility that they were kind of facing some backlash on the community. Well, when they did this, they actually got a lot more community residents involved. They had a lot more support for the project. And it ultimately, not only we feel that could apply here of not only bringing permanent flood protection, but then you get a real community buy-in. So we've been working with Joel and Commissioner Grinberg now to how we lay out this specification within the P3. We wanted to give, through Joel, he recommended that we come to you guys today, present our report and our concept, and then maybe get some feedback from you guys, from board members, and move forward with that. With that, I'll kind of just, if Joel has anything to add, I'll stand for any questions.
Thanks, Jason. I don't have much. That was pretty comprehensive, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's, in my mind, the two biggest issues we have in the FM area in particular is flood protection and workforce development and workforce needs. And so the board knows, I've brought this up to them before. I think we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't look at socioeconomic benefits of the FM diversion project as we start to move into the phase of constructing. And so I think you've done a good job, Jason, of outlining, the perspective of being able to train and specialize folks for the construction industry. And as you mentioned, from the Workforce Development Council with the state of North Dakota, that this fits right in with the plans that have been produced. And so with that, I guess we'll open it up for any questions from the board.
Jonathan Judd here from Moorhead. I want to apologize to Mr. Ehlert and Mr. Franco. I know this presentation came up at the chamber task force, and I apologize. I had to leave the call early in order to attend another meeting, but I do want to give some positive feedback. This is excellent. I think this is something that is great. We're investing in our region, investing into our own resources and our folks. So I see nothing but positives that could come out of this. So thank you very much for the presentation. I would enthusiastically support this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Tony. Let me just share a couple of perspectives. As Jason has alluded to, the slide that Lucas shared on pathways. I think it's important to understand what apprenticeship is, because it can mean different things to different people. But as the slide depicted, it's experience plus learning as well as credentialing that leads to a profession. And you can accomplish an apprenticeship, be part of a registered apprenticeship program in a number of ways, either through public institutions that offer it, or through a union-based model, and the opportunities or whatever pathway presents individuals. But what I was intrigued after we thought through this a little more is the youth side of the opportunity, and so the details of how this might be carved out in a P3 bid to make it user-friendly and representative of the overall goal is still something that has to be sorted out. But for example, and I know there are age requirements with, kids in high school, but if there's a way that we could tie in experience or internships on a limited basis to whet their students' appetites for, summer employment, if you will, or ultimately an apprenticeship program, I think that's in our best interest to spend time thinking about, and how do we accomplish that? And I think it goes well beyond just the construction profession, but I can tell you that, some of the engineers on the phone and the firms they represent, you can't find a civil tech in the market. And so there equally would be opportunities for kids in civil engineering tech to the other, plethora of positions that'll be impacted by this investment. So I agree with Jonathan Judd. Both Jonathan and I are now 2-year college guys. And so we're partners, obviously, on the diversion, and as the technical college in Moorhead, as well as NDSCS, where we do offer apprenticeship programs. I think that's part of it, but it's also part of how do we engage our public school systems, and at what point, or what's allowable, if you will, to have the experiences. So that would be my thoughts.